Yo, turn the overhead light off in the Monday. It's the left switch. What are they doing? Again?
By the
Oh, okay. No, I'm shooting this one out for now. I'm not using it. So wait, are we doing a tag or something? Because it's already 8:30. So we can start? Oh, so don't start, right? Oh, we can start. Oh, so we have a minute. I'm just asking. Alright, we can start. સજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજ મહાબળવંત માયા તમારી જેણે આવરિયા નર નારી એવું વરદાન લીજીએ આપે એ તમારે વિશે જીવન નાવે મનુષ્ય બુદ્ધિ કોઈ જે જે લીલા કરો તમે લાલ તેને સમજવું અલૌકિક ખ્યાલ સતસંગી જે તમારા કારે તેનો કેવી ભાવન આવે દેશ કાળ ને ક્રિયાએ કરી કેવી તમને ન ભૂલીએ તમને બજતા યાડું જે પડે માગીએ અમને નવનડે કેટલું માગીએ જઈએ અમે દેજો દયા કરી હરિ પડી ન માગીએ અમે જે તમે સુણી લેજો હરી કેવી દેશો માટે અભિમાન જેણે કરી વિસરો ભગવાન કેજી કુસંગનો સંગ માનેજો અધર્મ કરી ઉગારી લેજો કેવી દેશોમાં સંસારી સુખ દેશોમાં પ્રભુ વાસ વિમુખ દેશોમાં પ્રભુ જાત્ર મોટાઈ મદ મત્સર ઈર્ષા ખાઈ દેશોમાં દેવ સુખ સંયોગ દેશોમાં હરિજનનો વિયોગ દેશોમાં હરિજનનો અભાવ દેશોમાં અહંકારી સ્વભાવ દેશોમાં સંગ નાસ્તિક
નારાયણ નામ લેશે તેના બધા પાતક બાળી દેશે. છે નામ મારા શ્રુતિમાય અનેક સર્વોપરી આ જણાય એક. જો સ્વામિનારાયણ એક વાર રટે બીજા નામ રટ્યા હજાર. જપ્યા થકી જે ફળ થાય એનું કરી શકે વર્ણન કોણ તેનું. સારાક્ષરી મંત્રમાં સમર્થ જેથી થશે સિદ્ધ સમસ્ત. સુખી કરે સંકટ સર્વ કાપે અંતે વળી અક્ષરધામ આપે. ગમ્ય ધૃતિ લક્ષ ગુણો વિશેષ જાણે જેનો મહિમા મહેશ. જ્યાં જ્યાં મહામુક્ત જનો વસાય આ કાળમાં તો જપે જ થાય. જો અંધકારે શ્રવણે સુનાય પાપી ગણો તે પણ મોક્ષ જાય. તે મંત્રથી ભૂત પિશાચ ભાગે તે મંત્રથી તો સદબુદ્ધિ લાગે. તે મંત્ર જેના મુખથી જપાય તેના થકી તો જમનાશી જાય. શ્રી સ્વામિનારાયણ જે કહે છે ભાવે ભાવે પણ મુક્તિ દેશે. સરસરો છે સત્શાસ્ત્ર સાર એ તો ઉતારે ભવસિંધુ પાર. છ ઋતુમાં દિવસે દિશાએ સર્વ ક્રિયામાં સમરો સદાય. પવિત્ર દેહ અપવિત્ર દેહ તે નામ નિત્ય સમરોજ સ્નેહ. જડે કરીને તન મેલ જાય આ નામથી અંતર શુદ્ધ થાય. જેને મહાપાપ કર્યા અનંત જેણે પીડ્યા બ્રાહ્મણ તેનું સંત. તે સ્વામિનારાયણ નામ લેતા લાજી મરે છે મુક્તિ કહેતા. શ્રી સ્વામિનારાયણ નામ સાર છે પાવને તે પ્રજનાવનાર. પાપી ગણું અંતર હોય તેનું પડ્યા વિના કેમ રહે જ તેનું. પડ્યા વિના કેમ રહે જ તેનું. સહજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજ નમઃ કરું ઈશ્વરપાળને કર ગરી કહું ભક્તિ બાળને. અરજ મારી પૂરમાં ધરો વિપત મારી શ્રી હરિ હરો. અવર્યાસરો માહરે નથી સર્વજનને શુદ્ધ Oh. Oh. સજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય. સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના હીરા માણિક બહુ જડિયા પારણીએ હીરા માણિક બહુ જડિયા પારણીએ કાજુ શોભે છે રૂડી મોતીરાની ગોરાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પારણે સોનાના સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના કોળે ઝૂલાવે પ્યારી કાણે કુંવરને કોળે ઝૂલાવે પ્યારી કાન કુંવરને હાથે ગઈને રૂડી હીરાની રોજાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના કોઈક ગાનાને નેણે સારે કાજળિયું કોઈક ગાનાને નેણે સારે કાજળિયું કોઈક બનાવે રૂડી કસ્તુરાની ગોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બ્રહ્માનંદ કહે મુખ રસિયા વાલા મનો બ્રહ્માનંદ કહે મુખ રસિયા વાલા મનો ગોપી જોએ છે જેમ ચંદ્ર ચકોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના બોર સોનાના બોર ઝૂલે નંદ કિશોર પ્યારાને પારણે સોનાના સજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય.
Cal P. Yo. Cal P. Tell him to keep it down. Keep it down.
Are you singing, Rich?
You not doing one there? You not doing one?
Do you have my Nara and Sukari in your book?
I think I put it over there. एकच हमारी कॉपी है
Jaya ब्रह्मानंद कहे हारे सुखियो संत वचन उरधारी भजी नारायण भजी नारायण सुखकारी भजी नारायण सुखकारी
Just give me this.
Hello. Hello. Alright, so today we're gonna do Kayani 10. So just before I start, we've read about nine sub chapters of this Kayani, right? And so I think there's like a couple of recurring themes, and so I think over the past like few weeks we spoke one about I think mostly what I've realized in this one is that this has really been about obviously the whole book is about God, but this chapter really is about God. It talks a lot about what He likes, the kind of people He likes, and the way to please Him. So I think a few weeks ago we spoke about how God really hates being around people that have the trait of jealousy. That was about a few months ago. And then after that, we spoke about how why God comes down to earth and what are the reasons behind it. And then so today it's kind of a little bit of the same thing. So it's gonna talk a little bit about God, the things that He likes and the things that He doesn't, and the way you get closer to Him. So. Anyway, so that's just gonna be like kind of like the overview. This was actually it was a little tricky at first, but I mean, I'm gonna give you my interpretation of this. So everybody has their own opinion, but so we'll be able to discuss at the end what everybody thinks. But I think I had kind of a very different way of looking at this. Normally we read from top to bottom, but I had kind of a different view on this one. So I'll explain that after I finish this. In somewhat 1877, at night on the 10th day of the bright half of the month Kartik, Swami Sri Sajananji Maharaj graced the room of the eastern door at the royal residence of Vasakacha Nikayani. Before his lotus-like face, about 10 to 12 senior saints and about 5 or 6 devotees were in the congregation. Sriji Maharaj appeared to be slightly feverish. He was warming himself up before a fire pit. Then Sriji Maharaj said to Muktanand Swami, "Examine my pulse. There is something wrong in my body." Then, after examining the pulse, Muktanand Swami said, "Oh great Lord, there is something more serious." He further added, "Oh great Lord, At present, the followers are passing through hard times because, O great Lord, you are the life and soul of all of the followers. And anything physically wrong with the great Lord is itself hard time for the followers. So it starts off by God telling the saint Mukhan Swami that he might be feeling a little sick, and so he asked him to check him. So I think in this it says something wrong with his pulse, but I know in the Gujarati one it says how he has a fever. I think.
Got it.
Right? Yeah. So God's saying he has a fever or whatever, and so Mukhan Swami is saying that, well then we must be going through a hard time because you're the Lord. So if you're feeling feverish and your followers, they must be going through a hard time because of that. And so the next paragraph says, then Sriji Maharaj said, great austerities from some eons were performed by Nadaji, bearing cold, sunlight, hunger, and thirst, and then such austerities where he pleased God. In the same way, a person with discretion knowingly performs austerity by disciplining the body and the senses. So a saint with discretion should strive to behave in such a way that the body and the senses undergo discipline. If there is any suffering imposed by God, why should he not try to welcome it? Again, a saint should finally think thus: I do not want pleasures related to the 5 objects of pleasure available in the world of the gods, in the world of Brahma, Vaikuntha, etc. But so long as I'm living and thereafter, I want to please God by performing austerities during 1, 2, or even 1,000 years. A person achieves bliss by contemplating thus: whatever happens is due to the will of Sri Krishna Narayan, but nothing happens through God, karma, and maya. The supreme cause of bliss lies in the understanding that good alone, and even while performing austerities, one should love God through devotion marked by love, as the Radhika ji and Lakshmi ji for God. So this paragraph, it talks about he keeps saying austerity, so I had to I didn't really like that word, but that's why I kind of looked back on the Gujarati one, and that one it's tough, meditation. So he's saying that the way to please him is through meditation. That you need to meditate upon him, and that's the ultimate way of pleasing him. And again, he says that right. So he's kind of connecting this paragraph with the beginning of how he's being sick. And so, first he kind of talked about a little bit of meditation, but then I think the main point of this paragraph was that he says that he says that why should one try to avoid anything that happens to the body? I think the way I thought about it is when something happens to you, whether it's good or bad, I think you have to understand that it's for a purpose, right? That whatever it is, that's what it's God's will. And so I think that's kind of like the same thing that he's saying. That's why when I first thought about it, I think whenever we go through a hard time, someone always in the WhatsApp says something that there's a conversation between a boy and a God, and he says, "Why'd you make me late?" and all these things. And then God answers back and says, "Well, I made you late because if you went on time, you would have crashed or something." So I think in this paragraph, it's good to relate back to that, where whether it's with the body, whether it's with the life, or anything in general, I think we always tend to think, why did God do this? But we don't think that it's probably for a good reason. And so that's why God, I think in a way God is saying this, whatever happened in his body, he may be feeling feverish or whatever, but that's not the main point. It's that whatever is happening, it may be for a good reason. That just because you may be feeling sick at the time, it doesn't mean that there's bad times coming. I think that's what this paragraph kind of spoke about. So then, if a person does not perform austerities and knows that only God does all, he would be free from the sufferings of birth and death, but God will not be pleased with a person unless he performs thought. So again, he's saying that you may know that, this goes back to the paragraph about the meditation. You may know that God is the all-doing and he's the creator, the destroyer, and you may know all this knowledge of God. But he's saying that if you don't perform thought, then then it does. Then he says, what is it? Then it says God will not be pleased with a person. So he's saying that that you have to do this meditation in order to please him. None is a greater sinner than a person who does not look upon God as a creator or destroyer of all. He should be known as an heinous sinner, greater than one who has killed a cow or a Brahmin, cohabited by his preceptor's wife, or betrayed his God-realized preceptor because he looks upon it. Not good, but God and God, etc., as a creator of the universe. So one should not stand in even the shadow of such an atheist or an eater of a dog's meat. He should not be listened to even by mistake. So here, so we went from meditation, then he spoke a little bit about meditation, and he spoke about, he goes into now atheism. So he's saying that, well, before the atheism, he actually says that, you may know God as the creator and the destroyer, but ultimately if you don't, if you don't meditate, then he's not pleased by this. And then, right then after, he says that, well, also, if you listen to a person who says these kind of things where he kind of, an atheist, if you listen to those words by him, then, well, he's saying not to listen in the first place. So he's saying, so one should not even stand in the shadow of such an atheist or the eater of a dog's meat. He should not be listened to even by mistake, right? So, this is where kind of like, it got confusing because he just mixed like three, four things in one. That's why I kind of had to read it in like 2 languages because I didn't understand it in the first one. But I don't want to explain exactly why yet, well, at least my interpretation. So let me just ask, what has everyone got so far? Because I kind of have a good explanation, a decent one, but I don't want to say it until reading the whole thing. So we spoke about at least a little bit of things here. So like, what has everyone got, and like any clarifications that need to be made before I go on? The mic is over. You got it? What don't you get? What don't you get?
I had to read a couple times back and forth too, so I think my confusion is, as you said, there's a couple topics mixed in here. One, he starts talking about how to please God by doing stuff, and then he all of a sudden goes to, oh wait, but everything happens through him, and he is the controller of everything, and then if you don't believe in that, then you're considered an atheist. So I think that's pretty much the gist of the first paragraph that you read. My confusion, was why does he bring these two together? I think the more we talk about it, we may come up with something.
So, right, that's kind of like, that's what I wanted to speak about, but if anyone has any idea what's the answer to the question he just said, you can say it. I'm not going to answer it right now, but I just want to kind of know if anyone even like understands it, because I don't know if my interpretation is right, but I think I have a pretty good one.
Right or wrong, it's
All right, so if no one does, so he's saying, the last thing.
Ask them.
Do you guys have anything? You don't?
Oh my God, Krishna, so smart.
Yeah, I don't get the connection of why you put all those topics together, but like I get the gist of like what each topic is.
All right, so then I'll just continue. So pretty much the last thing we just said was, we spoke about the atheists. So now, because of the prowess of God, the devotee of God may be as great as Brahma, Shiv, Sukji, and Nada. They may become as great as Prakriti Purush, and they may become as great as even Brahman, or Akshar, but none is ever powerful enough to be like Purushottam Narayan. Association with them should immediately be given up, and their scriptures should be discarded immediately by our followers. If such scriptures are listened to, there would be a breach in the Upasana of God and the Swami Sevak Bhav. The follower's relation to God as master and servant would end. Keep away from them as immediately, and keep away from the eater of the meat of God. Yeah, so he's saying that so pretty much we spoke about the atheists. He kind of like gave like a general, he gave a general summary of it, and he said that this is what an atheist does, where he shouldn't even be around. But he's saying that now, if you do come across him, and you do happen to know that this person is an atheist, he's saying that his words, anything that he says, it should be discarded. That it shouldn't be paid attention to. If you're reading scriptures or anything by that person, you shouldn't be. And obviously that makes sense. We've heard this like 50 times already. Don't listen to someone that's going to do that. Why? Because he most likely will poison your mind. He'll say things where he might get you to believe that there is no God, or whatever the case may be. He'll get you off the path of what you're doing, of devotion. So he's just saying that that's the person that you want to stay away from. Then Muktanand Swami asks, "O great Lord, there is a devotee who serves God by offering beautiful dresses." So before I start that, so we spoke about the atheist. That was like maybe a good paragraph. And then before that, he spoke about the meditation, right? So he said that you may do whatever you want. You can do all these things, but a person, the only way you're going to please God is through meditation. He said that you may know His knowledge, you may know everything, but you're not going to please Him unless you meditate. So then Muktanand Swami asks, "O great Lord, there's a devotee who serves God by offering beautiful dresses, ornaments, eatables of different types, and thus tries to please God. But you declare that God is pleased only through meditation. What is wrong in pleasing God through the service without doing meditation?" So he's saying that you're saying the Swami is saying, "Oh God, you just told us that meditation is the only way to please you. But then what about the people who bring God all clothes, food, and all these other things?" So pretty much what we're doing here, right? Decorating Him and all that. So what about those people? So do they not please you? So then God says, "It is all right if a person worships God by offering good things, provided he does so with a selfless motive and only for pleasing God. But if a person looks upon all such things offered to God as holy offerings to Him, and he is tempted towards such things while neglecting God, he would enjoy all things and would fall spiritually. That is the obstacle. Thus, a devotee who has aversion to the world should look upon God only through austerities and worship God with devotion marked with love, just as Radhika and Lakshmi Ji did. This is my principle." So, what just happened?
He just said that anything you do, you shouldn't do it for benefits. You should do it because you're doing it for God. Selflessly.
It says that it's fine if you offer things like jewelry and clothing to God, but you can't be tempted by these objects. That you can't want these objects after it's all done. So if that does happen, then you're the bad one.
So, right, so when I was reading this, so when I read this, right, so anyway, so when I read it, you kind of, you first, the reason why it struck me was because I don't meditate, so it's like, I'm not pleasing God, so that's pretty much what you think when you first read the thing. So, but when you read on, you read this paragraph and it shows like, God is merciful. He's saying that, well, I mean, Muktan when he first asked, maybe, he knows, he sees that, not everybody meditates, whatever the case may be. But he says that, so is that only the way to please you? Well, what about all these other things? So I think, those other things sort of apply to me. And so when you read it, you look at the next paragraph and you see God as, you see how merciful God is, and then you think, I thought about it, but see, that's the main thing that is that, you could do all these nice things for God, but you have to understand why it is that you're doing it. So for example, the first thing that came to my mind, I don't know why, was an uncle. So like, for example, if there's an uncle going on here, when we're sitting down over there, right, we can't be thinking, I can't wait to eat that, or I can't wait to, or I hope that the pizza's left over so I can take it home, or whatever the case may be. Or when you're making it, I can't wait to eat it. But I think what you have to think about is, when you're making it, is who it's for, right? So it's like, when you're making it, this is gonna be great, God's gonna be eating this. And at the end, what you really should be thinking about is, if it comes to you, then yeah, that's great, it's prasad. But at the end of the day, it's all prasad, right? So I think that, it's kind of like, in the Vachan, they use the word bhav. I don't know what the English word to that is, but I understand the Gujarati word.
It's okay?
Bhav, like, you have to have that bhav for God.
Love.
Right, love. So that's what you gotta have, So it's like, you may be able to do all those things, but if you don't have that love, then it's pointless, because you're not doing it for the right reasons. And so that's what God says, that yeah, if a person is doing all this with the love, then that's fine, but...
It's basically, in other words, by heart.
Right. So, if you really mean it from the bottom of your heart, then that's all right,
That's
He's
real
saying that,
love.
right, so he's saying that if you're doing it that way, then that's fine, but if you don't have that same, love while you're doing these things, then no, then you're not pleasing anybody. And so that's pretty much what he spoke about in this paragraph.
I think, how can you stop this? About?
No, yeah, he uses Nishkam something, but later on he uses Baal, so I thought it was
No.
I think Niskam Bhav means, there is no expectation back. It's one way only. Give.
The unconditional.
Unconditional love.
That's
No expectation. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what that paragraph talks about. And then Brahmanand Swami said, "O great Lord, tell us how we can attain bliss in this world and here on after." So then, he says, how can we be happy in this world but also in the other? And then Sriji Maharaj said, "This is my principle itself, and it is for supreme bliss in this world and hereafter." So pretty much, when I read that, it's kind of, I don't know, he's saying, how can we attain bliss? And then he answers in one paragraph. He says that these things I just said are the supreme bliss, and this is what you're going to get, and this is how you're going to be happy in this life and in the left, in the next, in another world. So I'm going to just continue reading on. And then Govind Swami asked, "O great Lord, a person may have intense love for renunciation and austerity, but while doing the same, he may meet some obstacles. What should he do then?" So then, this applies to everybody. He's saying that you may have the love for God, you may do all these things, but at any given point, you're going to hit an obstacle. And he's saying, what should you do? So what should you do when you hit that crossover? So then, Sriji Maharaj said, if a person has intense love for anything, he cannot be stopped even with force, even when there are 1,000 of obstacles. Such intense love should be known as genuine. So he's saying, God is saying that if you have intense love for anything, then you can't be stopped. There's no force that can stop you. That the love, the force that generates of love, it's too strong to be stopped. And so I think I read in another Vachan, they use the word determination. So they're saying in that other one, it's worded differently. They said that if you have the determination, then if you have the right determination, then you can't be stopped. So it's that makes sense, if you're determined to do well in school, then nothing's gonna stop you. If you're an athlete, the athletes, right, if they're determined to make it to the pros, they're gonna keep training, they're gonna keep doing those things. So the same way, if you're determined for God, you're gonna keep doing it until anything, You may hit the crossroads, and maybe even for a bit, you may feel you may start to question God, but at the end of the day, you most likely will get back on the right track. And so, such intense love should be known as genuine. See, I came to Ramanand Swami when I was 21 years old, and I have met innumerable devotees who served me by years old by offering various types of dresses, ornaments, and tasty food items. But my mind has not been tempted by any of these objects. So he's saying that he's been doing this, whatever. He's met Ramanand Swami since 21, and
Not since 20, since 21 years.
right, for 21 years, right? Yeah, and so, and people maybe at that point have noticed his greatness, and they've actually been offering him these things. And so that goes back to the Vajram with whoever did it, where someone brings God clothes and God just gives it away, like it was nothing. But that's the thing. God doesn't God doesn't love those. He doesn't say, oh, this person bought me a shiny dress or whatever. He takes it for
To make him happy.
to make the other person happy. And then just in that same way, once he gets it, if he gave that to somebody else, that other person's gonna be happy because
Right.
he gave that same thing to someone else. So it's like, prasadi, right?
Right.
So it's like it's holy now. So the
Yeah.
other person accepted it that way. And that person, he may have gotten joy out of that. So that's what he's saying, that he's done this for so long, but when people offer him things, this is how he feels. And so, I don't know if he said it, I will continue reading on, but that's the way we should be doing it to God, right? So when we're offering him something, we offer him in that mindset. And when it comes back as a prasad, right? When we do that, you take it in that same way, where you take it in with that love and joy, that if he actually was here to give it to you, the way you would feel. And then the reason is that I have intense love for renunciation. In this world, there are many widows who go on crying and beating their breasts after the death of their husbands. And there are married women who worship God while remaining separate from their husbands. There are some unwise persons who go on crying after the wife who is dead and then frantically try for getting another wife. There are other persons with vairagya. There are wives in their houses, but they worship God while remaining detached from Him. Thus, all have different types of intense love. So now he's just saying, he spoke about how his love is, or how his mindset is, and then he's saying that he practices renunciation, and then in this world, there's all these different types of people where there's a male who's married to a female, but he still has so much love for God. Or then on the other side, there's like a female whose husband died, and all she can think about is the husband dying, right? And then there's another male whose wife died, and all he can think of is getting another wife. And so he's saying that, but I have intense love only for one thing, and that is my principle to please God through austerity and to worship God while keeping in mind that God is the creator and destroyer of all, and to serve God with Swami Seva Bhav, and never to allow any breach in the worship of God. So you too should accept these words of mine as supreme principle. So, he pretty much just said, he spoke about how all these other people have all these different sorts of love, but the way his love is only one and one only, and then that's just to please God, and whether it be through meditation or to serve Him, regardless of which way it's for the love of God. So I think that's the main point towards the end of this paragraph, is that you may come across all these hardships, but I think what you have to understand is that you're doing it. You have to keep one thing in mind, where you can't be pondering over the negatives that you come across, or the negative things that have happened in life, but you have to understand that you have to move on, and you have to have that one love, and that is just to please God, whether it be through meditation, or whether it be through the ways of bringing Him all these things, food, clothing, whatever you offer Him. You have to do that through love. And so, that was the end of the Vajram. That's what he spoke about. But so like I said, there was a lot of points in the Vajram, and when first, I'm pretty sure all you guys, just by reading it for the first time, or listening to it, the beginning made no sense, and then as you went on, it kind of made more sense. So that's what happened to me. I read it in Gujarati, it was the same thing. It was it kind of made a little bit better sense, but it was the same thing. And then, so normally when we think about it, it's the Vajram starts from top to bottom, and that's the way you look at it. But I don't know, I kind of just looked at the points going backwards, and I don't know, for me, it made a lot more sense where, because in the beginning, God keeps talking about His principles, principle, but I didn't know what his principle was. Like, I don't know, he mentioned it in the beginning, but it was very hard to understand it. Because, God, Brahman Swami asked, how can we attain bliss in this world and in the other? And then God just says, well, if you follow my principle, then that's all you need. You can use that in this life and the next, and you'll be happy. But it's my principle that you need to follow. But when I read it, it's like, what is the principle? Because I didn't catch it. And then towards the end is when you see that principle. So when I when I read it the first time, and obviously those are the questions that came up. But when you think about it backwards, he talks first. If we read the whole Vajra backwards, what happens is, all right, he talks about the love that the different people have, his mindset, where he has no feelings towards those things that you give him, and he's only doing it for his devotees. And the principle here is that it's the love that is really generating this. Where, if it wasn't for the love, then those things have no meaning. So if you don't have love for God, if God came and gave you something, it has no meaning, because you really don't know who God is if you don't have the love for Him. So if that happened, if something holy, if you were given something holy and you didn't know of it, then it's nothing. It's just another piece of pizza, right? So that was that part. And then so when you go on and read it again backwards, then Brahman Swami asks, so how can you attain bliss in this world and the next? Well, if you follow that same mentality where it's, you have to have that love for God, and the only way of life is to please God, right? Whether it be through meditation, whether it be through the offerings, or whatever it may be, you have to have the intense love for God, right? Unconditional love for God. And then after that, God talks about staying away from atheists. So that was like...
So he's talking about 2-3 different principles, right?
Right. So that was the first one, and now this is the second part where he talks about when you come across an atheist, this is how you have to approach it, where you don't listen to anything that the person says, and you discard, any words that he's told you, any books that you've been given, anything that you've been reading. If those are words from an atheist, you don't, take them into consideration. So that was the second one. The first one was the intense love for God. Then the second one was the association of an atheist. And then, if you go all the way to the beginning, then it's the first 2 paragraphs. God talks about how he was sick and everything. And so when you think about that, it's like, they spoke about it for maybe 2-3 sentences. God told him he was sick. God told Swami he was sick, and they took his pulse. They found out he had a fever. And then God talks about how Naraji, he went through cold, sunlight, hunger, thirst, all these things just to please God. And so I think what you have to get out of that is that somebody like that, he meditated and he went through all these sufferings just to please God. His body went through so much, and so he didn't even think for a second, why is it that all these sufferings are coming to me while I'm meditating to God? And so when you think about it, I think what's happening is that you have, like I said in the beginning, where it's like, all these sufferings may come to you, but I think God is saying that, why would you try to push them away? Where it's like you're doing it for God, right? You're doing it to please God when you're actually doing all those things. And so why is it that you're trying to push it away? That's what he's saying. He said, so a saint with discretion should strive to behave in such a way that the body and senses undergo discipline. If there is any suffering imposed by God, why should one not try to welcome it? So whether it be good or bad, if there's any kind of suffering or any good, if it's good, we welcome it. But when it's bad, we say, oh, why is it that this happened to me? Why am I cursed? Or why is it that I'm doing bad financially? Or why did my wife die or whatever, right? So when that happens, we don't welcome it. But when it's the good, we do. So God's saying that, why should we not try to welcome it, all of it? If it's imposed by God, why is it that we can't welcome it? And so I think that, that may be the third principle. That's what I wasn't sure about, but that's something to think about, where we have, I think the main thing that I really liked about this one was that why is it that, you know, when we have the positives coming, we accept them and we're praising God and we're doing all these things to God. I think, you know, you look in, on TV or whatever, you know, in shows and stuff, when something good happens, they do pujas and stuff, right? Or like before, like when they get like a house or something, you do ma pujas or whatever. So when good things happen, you embrace God. But then when the bad happens, we question them, like, oh, why is it that this happened? Like, I don't understand. Why is it that my house broke down or whatever? So why is it that we're not welcoming those things, but we are this? So I think that was one of the main things that I kind of like, when I went back, I understood that, you know, it was like a main question that hit me. I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. But that was what came across to me when I read that. And so, is there anyone else that has anything to say? Over there.
I think he's describing the character. He's looking for the characteristic of the devotee, isn't it? Now, when he says tap in the first part, what he means by that? There is a two-way, right? Panchindriya and Dehi. Dehi means body and the senses, right? Now, if you're doing a thought, and when you are curbing your senses, there are a lot more you can do. I remember when where I born, in Uttar Sunda, where we're from. I saw there was one of the well in the pond, and whenever the pond is full, the well also gets full because it's getting water from outside, from the talab, right? It's the same thing that goes to us. When we go around it and look at around the things, our five senses get charged. Remember, it's not, these five senses is not towards the God, it's towards the world. Okay? It's totally outside, not inside. Because if it is inside, you're looking at the God then. So we are, what sin says are outside, right? So he's trying to tell us to do the austerity, to curb your senses. That's the first thing he talks about. Second thing, he talks about atheists. Now the person who is an atheist can influence you by either the worldly possession or either the way he will say about a God, right? If, for example, somebody come to you and say, listen, you go to work and you get the paycheck, right? God doesn't give you paycheck. You work for it. Now, if somebody doesn't have a faith, I'm sure he will believe that that's what I'm doing. I go to work and make money. Is God not giving me anything? If he does, then he will give me a check without working, right? I mean, that's the second one. So he said, don't believe those because they are taking away from the path, right? Now, third thing, there was a fourth facet I saw so far. That's actually end up in the same root. Now, he talks about the Kartapan. He says, my devotee should believe that I am the only one who, whatever is going to happen to him, I am the one who's doing it, right? So, that goes to him too. Then, he talks about the thought, about Shivji, Brahma and Sukji and all of those, right? Now, when you do the thought, I'm sure your mind and the soul and body, right, comes together and you are just finally what you want, right? Which is Lord Swaminarayan. That's where you wanted to go, right? You become more strong enough and have a senses that goes in him rather than having towards the world. right? So that he's talking about that Vairagyavan Purush, that one's wife died and one has a wife but he's not enjoying the worldly pleasure, right? So he's giving an example of it. So when the person does the top, he has everything but he's not using any of those. So he's just living out everything, right? Then, there is one more. So finally he summarized everything. Those 2-3 things I talk about, finally summarize. But this is basically the quality in a devotee, right? He should have a thought, vairagya. He should be kartapanam, that's me understanding the Lord Swaminarayan, who he is and how we related to him and what he does for us and whatever it is, right? So if you have a thought, then you can leave everything out. You have no interest in those things, the worldly possessions. So it means nobody can influence you, right? Nobody can take you out from the Lord's path. And I think that's basically he's just trying to say, leave this out, it's not for us. You and me is only 2 people, and that's about it. It might be, I don't know, it's a little bit longer and he puts different facets out. It's very hard to summarize, but I think basically that comes to it.
Gotta say something, everybody gotta say something. Then I'm going to start, it's going to be Jagran tonight. Again.
And then also he said Swami Sevak, that's one goes one more step ahead. When you have a thought, you get the power. And don't let you be out of your head. And just, that happens to so many people, like they used to be doing so much stuff and finally they come out of it and they think they are out of this world and even beyond God. So he just tell you where your place is.
Yes, I guess for the most part, this whole chapter focuses on love for God, and I think the message I'm getting here is to love God. It's kind of like instructions almost. He talks about when you offer something, offer it solely as tribute to Him, for Him. Don't fall in love with the object, fall in love with God Himself. And he talks about detachment, right? So the more you detach yourself from the world, the more you can love God. And the more you love God, the happier you will be. And that's kind of theoretically that's how it should work out. And then he talks about, you kind of mentioned, what about all these bad things that happen? Why do we not? Why don't we celebrate? A bad event happening? It's because we don't realize that everything that happens is because of God. He's the creator and the destructor, right? He's the cause of everything. So I think the message I'm really getting is just it's pretty much at the end. It says keep in mind that God is the creator and destroyer of all, and serve Him with Swami Sevak and never allow any breach of worship in God. So I think that's what it's about. Just keeping Him your highest principle and loving Him as much as possible. And if you love Him enough, if you develop that strong love for Him, then no objects will be in your way. Like if whatever gets in your way, it's not gonna matter because you're gonna have so much love for the Lord, that you'll come over whatever obstacle is in the way. If you're a parent and you get a phone call at work or something happened to your kid or something, right? You just run run after them no matter what. Doesn't matter if your boss says you're gonna lose your job if you leave. You're gonna run and go to him because you love your child or whoever it is. Same way, if you develop love with God, nothing's gonna get in your way. That's the way I see it.
Over there. The girl.
So I have a couple of questions. As we read through this, excellent job in deciphering. I think this is a tough question. And the question, I'll throw it at 5. Is he understood the meaning of it. So I want you to, the only reason is, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, the only reason is, I want you to see if you can apply it. Right? Once you can apply something, that means you have it. Whether or not this is the right question to ask, I'm not sure, but that the other guys, we agree with this can judge. But the question is, so he says, if you do dub, then that's how he's pleased, right? Are you familiar with the Jain dub? The Jains, right? That's pretty much all they believe in. That's all they do. They do a lot of stuff. During their 8 days of fast, a lot of them don't even drink water. It's pure fast. And Maharaj in one of the other verses has called them atheists. So how do you connect it? He should be pleased, right? Because they're doing stuff.
Doesn't he call them atheists because they don't have a form of God? Like they don't have a mortier.
Thanks, Maharaj.
Sorry.
You
No.
just cut him off. Good. Okay.
That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons. That's another reason. But how do you connect it to this vachan that we just read? And that link, I think, is very important. No. It's not about just meditation, right? Tap means you can sit there and you can meditate or you can fast. And there's different types of taps, right? So how do you connect? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why he brings that second point, which is his siddhant, right? You can do all tap, all meditation, all fasting, whatever you want to do. There's monks on Himalayas and Nepal that are, fasting for ages and ages and ages. But if you don't believe in Bhagwan as the controller, as the doer of all, it means nothing. We believe in karma too, but we don't believe that our karma is always, or this karma will always have this result. This is what their belief is. Our belief is we can continue to do karma, let God give us a result, whatever result He wants to give us. And so that differentiates between, and that's why you should do whatever He's told us to do, but at the end, we still believe Him as the one that does it. So these are, when we're doing Vachanas, if you start, if you start asking questions to yourself and become curious, you're going to get a lot more out of it. And try to apply it very practically.
No? I gotta come up there.
This guy.
Start that? You start that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will come back.
Before you start our question,
Okay.
explain to me why
Call
in the
you.
beginning,
Priya, this is call you, we come back. Huh?
Where did it go?
Home. What is it?
He went home.
explain to me why in the beginning he sets up a scenario where he's saying that he's saved, and then Swami's saying, oh, it should be a bad day for your ssssnyc because you're saved, stuff like that. Explain that first.
But
Yeah, why is that?
we are on the same page. That's what I'm going to start. And that's end. That's the beginning and that's the end of this Vajrayana.
Because he usually sets it up this way.
Yes.
સહજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય. શ્રી હરિ કૃષ્ણ મહારાજની જય. શ્રી ગણેશાન મહારાજની જય. સ્વામિનારાયણ ભગવાનની જય. સૌથી પહેલું મહારાજે વાત કરી, સંતોએ જે લખ્યું, ક્યાં બેઠા છે, કઈ સાલ છે, કઈ સંમત છે, બધું રાઈટ. કાર્યાની મધ્ય બેઠા છે, વસ્તાકાચરનો દરબાર છે, અને પર્ટિક્યુલર દિસ વચનામૃતની અંદર ઉલ્લેખ કર્યો છે, રાઈટ. ફરી ધ્યાન સાંભળજો. બીજા બધા વચનામૃતના પેજ બિગિનિંગ ખોલી સાંભળી લેજો, જોઈ લેજો. પોતાના મુખારવિંદની આગળ 10-12 મોટેરા સાથે. કેટલા? 10 થી 12. અને કોણ? ઓનલી ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ પીપલ, રાઈટ. મોટેરા સાધુ બેઠા હતા અને 5-6 બેઝિકલી એ પણ કેવા છે, બરોબર. એમાં મોટેરામાં આટલા તો હતા જ જેણે પ્રશ્ન પૂછ્યો છે. બ્રહ્માનંદ સ્વામી, ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી, મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામી, બરોબર છે. એટલે આ 3 તો હતા જ. એટલે આ 3 નતા એની હાજરી ઘેર, આ નતા બીજા હતા એ તો વાત થઈ. એટલે અહીં લખાયું છે મોટેરા. અને એમાં ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી આ વચનામૃત લખવાની જે મહારાજે પરમિશન આપી 4 સદગુરુને, એમાં ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી નથી. એટલે આ 4 તો હતા જ જેને મહારાજે પરમિશન આપી દે વચનામૃત લખવાની, એ 4 તો હોય જ બધે કોમન, પ્લસ ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી હતા. એમાં આપણે બહુ નથી જોવું, પણ મહારાજ આજે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ વાત છે, અગત્યની વાત છે. પ્લસ મહારાજે શું કર્યું? આ લાંબો કર્યો. સંતો ખબર નથી, સંતો ખબર નથી, ખબર હતી, રાઈટ. મોટેરા સાધુ 5-6 હરિભક્ત બેઠા હતા. શ્રીજી મહારાજના શરીરમાં કંઈક તાવ જેવું જણાતું હતું, તાવ જેવું જણાતું હતું, રાઈટ. એટલે પ્રિટેન્ડ કરીને મહારાજ બેઠા છે અને એ બધા આવે. આટલી જ સભા હતી, આટલી નાની જતી સભા, બરોબર. અહીં આગળ હવે ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી બેઠા છે. મહારાજ જે રીતે બેઠા છે ને એ રીતે સંતોને ખબર પડી કે મહારાજના શરીરે તાવ જેવું જાણે છે, થોડા વીક દેખાય છે. સગડી મેલીને તાપતા હતા. શું કહે છે? કારતક મહિનાની એટલે ઠંડી હોય, પણ એટલી બધી ઠંડી ના હોય. ખ્યાલ આવે? અત્યારે ઇન્ડિયમ ગરમી લાગે છે. એટલે મહારાજને સિઝન ચેન્જ થાય ને એની ઠંડીથી આપણે પ્રિટેન્ડ કરીએ છીએ કે એવું જ હતું. એટલે મહારાજ તાપતા હતા. પછી શ્રીજી મહારાજે મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામીને કહ્યું છે અમારી નાડી જુઓ. એટલે મહારાજ મને ટુ મેક શ્યોર કે ભાઈ આ લોકોને ખબર છે ને હું બીમાર છું,
બરોબર છે? કંઈક શરીરમાં કસર જેવું જણાય છે. પછી મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામી નાડી જોઈને કહ્યું છે, હે મહારાજ, કસર તો બહુ છે. અને વળી એમ કહ્યું છે, હે મહારાજ, હમણાં સત્સંગને કઠણકાળ વર્તે છે, કેમ છે હે મહારાજ, તમે તો સર્વે સત્સંગના જીવન પ્રાણ છો, તે મહારાજના શરીરે કસર જેવું છે, એ સર્વે સત્સંગીને કઠણકાળ છે. અહીંયાથી વચન સ્ટાર્ટ થાય છે, રાઈટ? મોસ્ટ ઓફ યુ ગાઈઝ સેઝ મહારાજે સિદ્ધાંતની વાત કરે છે, પણ મોસ્ટ ઓફ લાઈક યુ સે જય સે ઇઝ ટોક અબાઉટ લવ, રાઈટ? મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામીના મોઢામાંથી આ શબ્દો નીકળ્યા. વાય? Because of his love toward God, right? નહીંતર એ કોઈ એવું કે તમે બીમાર છો એટલે જ આવું થાય છે મને. અને આ સત્સંગ સમાજને માટે શું છે? દુઃખની વાત છે. અને તમે તો કેવા છો? સમગ્ર સત્સંગના જીવન પ્રાણ જીવન છો, જીવન પ્રાણ. ખ્યાલ આવે કે તમે નહીં હોય તો શું થશે? એટલે આ મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામી આવા જે રીતે what you interpret, what they interpret, what you interpret, what you interpret, what you interpret, this is my interpretation. Okay? There is, I didn't read it in scriptures anywhere, I didn't heard anywhere. This is મારું crazy demand. Any thought છે? બરાબર છે? I'm going to, because this is small sub, aggressive sub, so I'm going to say whatever I'm feeling it right now. Okay? એટલે સત્સંગના જીવન પણ આટલો અહીંયા ઘણી આના શાના પરથી ઇન્ટરપ્રેટ કરું છું? આની પછી જે મહારાજ બોલ્યા છે ને, મહારાજ શું કહે છે? પછી શ્રીજી મહારાજ બોલ્યા છે, આમ મહારાજના શરીરમાં તાવ હતો, કાપતા હતા, બરોબર? શરીર નતું સારું, અને 5, 6, 15 જણને એકલા બેસાડેલા. અને એનો અર્થ એક વસ્તુ તો નક્કી થઈ ને કે મહારાજ સભા કરી બેઠા નથી. મહારાજ સભા કરી બેઠા નથી. મહારાજને શરીરે કસર જેવું જણાતું હતું ને, એટલે મોટેરાને અંદર જવા દીધેલા. સમજાય? બીજા કોઈ અંદર ગયા નતા. એટલે પેલા અંદર ગયેલા ને પ્રી પ્લાન થઈ ગયેલા. ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી, બ્રહ્માનંદ સ્વામી મોસ્ટ લવ ફોર મહારાજ. મહારાજના સખા ફ્રેન્ડશીપ હતી મહારાજ જોડે, રાઈટ? અને મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામી કોણ હતા? મોટા હતા. મહારાજ બધું એમનું માનતા હતા. અને ગોપાળાનંદ સ્વામી ને જોડે જોડે રાખતા, રાઈટ? એટલે આ 3 જણા ભેગા થઈને આગળ કેમ વાત કરી કે મહારાજ આ ટાઈમનું કાઢશે નહીં? અહીંયા ઘડી મહારાજ મજબૂર થશે. એટલે આ લોકો બહારથી અંદર આવ્યા ને ત્યારથી નક્કી કરીને આવ્યા કે આ મહારાજ દેહ છોડવાની વાત કરતા હોય તો આપણે એને ના પાડવાની, કે મહારાજ ના. એટલે મુક્તાનંદ સ્વામી ઇનિશિયેટ કર્યું કે મહારાજ તમે તો સત્સંગના પ્રાણ જીવન છો. ખ્યાલ આવ્યો? એટલે મહારાજે વાત ચાલુ કરી. મહારાજને તો માનો જોયું હતું કે આ લોકો કંઈક બોલે પછી હું બોલું. એટલે મહારાજ આ ચાલુ કર્યું. મહારાજ બોલ્યા છે, ભગવાનને પ્રસન્ન કરવા માટે નારદજીએ કેટલાક યુગ પર્યંત ટાઢ તડકાને તથા ભૂખ તરસને સહન કરીને મહાતપ કર્યું, અને તે તપે કરીને ભગવાનને રાજી કર્યા. એવી રીતે જે વિવેકી હોય તે તો જાણીને પોતાના દેહેન્દ્રિયોને દમીને તપ કરે. માટે જે વિવેકી સાધુ હોય તેણે તો જાણીને દેહેન્દ્રિયોને કષ્ટ થાય એવું વર્તવું જોઈએ. તો ઈશ્વર ઈચ્છાએ જે કંઈ કષ્ટ આવે તેને સિદ્ધ ટાળવાની ઈચ્છે. અને વળી ત્યાગી સાધુને તો પોતાના મહેન્દ્ર રુચિ રાખવી જોઈએ છે. મારે તો દેવલોક, બ્રહ્મલોક, વૈકુંઠાદિના પંચ વિષય તે સંબંધી શું એ નથી જતા. અને મારે તો હમણાં દેહ સત્ય તથા દેહને ત્યાગ કરીને બદ્રિકાશ્રમમાં જઈને તપ કરીને ભગવાનને રાજી કરવા છે. એક જન્મ અથવા તો 2 જન્મ અથવા સહસ્ત્ર જન્મ સુધી પણ તપ કરીને જ ભગવાનને રાજી કરવા છે. બરોબર છે? આટલે સુધીમાં મહારાજે શું કર્યું વાત કે ભગવાનને બેઝિકલી રાજી કરવાની વાત કરી. હે કેવી રીતે? તપ આદિ કરીને. બરોબર છે? પણ એની અંદર એક મહારાજ શું કર્યું કે ભગવાનને પ્રસન્ન કરવા માટે નારદજીએ કેટલાક ટાળ ડરકો તથા ભૂખ તરસને સહન કરીને મહાતપ કર્યું. તે તપે કરીને ભગવાનને રાજી કર્યા. એ રીતે જે વિવેકી હોય તે તો જાણીને પોતાના દેહને દમીને તપ કરે. માટે જે વિવેકી સાધુ હોય તેને જાણીને દેહેન્દ્રિયોને કષ્ટ થાય એમ વર્તવું જોઈએ. શું કે છે? આની અંદર એક શબ્દ પકડવા જેવો છે. કયો? વિવેકી. બરોબર છે? તપ તો થાય એટલે તપની અંદર તમે જેમ કીધું મેડિટેશન આવે ને કીધું એમ ધ્યાને આવે. તપની અંદર ત્યાં કહ્યું કે ભૂખ તરસ અહીંયા નકોડી 11 કરે, હે ચાંદ્રાયણ કરે, બધું કરે. આ બધા તપ આવે. ટાળધર સહન કરે. પણ મહારાજે ના પડી. મોટા સંતો તો 11 આઈટમ કરીને જમવાના આઈટમ. તો પછી એમાં આ તો ભગવાનના સિદ્ધાંતની વિરુદ્ધ થયું. પણ આની અંદર આ તપની અંદર વિવેક શબ્દ સમજવા જેવો છે. સમજ્યા? વિવેક શબ્દ અહીં મહારાજ કેમ વાપર્યો કે હજી તો હું અહીંયા બેઠો છું અને તમે શું વિચારો છો કે મહારાજ જશે પછી અમારું શું? અમે ભેગા જતા રહીએ તો વહેલા જતા રહીએ. આપણે એનો વિયોગ કેમ સહન કરીશું? એનું તમને પાછળ કનેક્શન કરી આપું છું. એટલે બહુ મગજ દોડાવતો નહીં હમણાં. એટલે અહીંયા ઘડી મહારાજે કેમ કીધું કે તમે આ બધા વિચાર મૂકો અને તમે વિવેક ચૂક્યા છો. તારે કેવી પ્રેમમાં વિવેક ચૂક્યા હતા. શું કહે છે ભગવાન? તમને મારા માટે પ્રેમ છે, લવ છે, લાગણી છે, પણ તમે અત્યારે શું થઈ રહ્યા છો? વિવેક ચૂકી ગયા છો. તપ કોને કર્યું કહેવાય? નારદજીએ તપ કેવું કર્યું હતું? ભૂખ તરસ વેઠી. પણ નારદજીનું તપનું નારદજીનું આખું વાદ્યાત છે ને, જન્મદિવસ માને સાફ કર્યો, પછી ગયા નદી કિનારે ગયા, ગંગા કિનારે ગયા. એ તો બહુ લાંબી કહાની છે, પણ ટૂંકમાં કહું તો કે નારદજીને સંતોએ કહ્યું કે ભાઈ તો પછી શું કહેવાય આના બ્રહ્મના પુત્ર થયા. અને એમ કહેતા કેટલા જન્મો પછી એને ભગવાન મળ્યા. પણ એ ભગવાન ભજવાનું છોડ્યું નહીં. કહેવાનો મતલબ શું કે જે સંતોની એને સેવા કરી ને એ સંતોએ એવું કીધું કે ભાઈ તું દાસી પુત્ર છે અત્યારે, પણ તું ભગવાનનું ભજન કરજે. અમે સેવા કરી એ તારી આડે નહીં જાય અને ભગવાનનું ભજન કરશે તો ભગવાન મળશે. કેટલા જન્મ પછી પણ એને એ વચન મૂક્યું નહીં. ભગવાન એ તપની વાત કરે છે. ભૂખ્યા તરસ્યા કે ઉપવાસ કે ઊંધા માટે લટકવાના તપની વાત કરતા નથી. ખ્યાલ આવ્યો? બીજી વાત, આ સંતોએ આ વાત કરી એટલે મહારાજે આ વાત કે નારદજીનું દ્રષ્ટાંત અહીં લઈ આવ્યા. અને આ તો બધા જ્ઞાની બેઠેલા એટલે એમને કે ડિટેલમાં કહેવાની જરૂર નથી. એટલે મહારાજે નારદજીની વાત કરી કે પણ એમણે શું કર્યું કે આવું બધું સહન કરીને ભગવાનને રાજી કર્યા. એ રીતે વિવેકી હોય એને જાણીને દેહેન્દ્રિયોને દમ કરે. દેહેન્દ્રિયોની અહીં ઘડી દમવાની વાત મહારાજે કેમ કરી? ઇનડાયરેક્ટલી વાત મારા શું કહેવા માંગે છે કે તમારું દેહેન્દ્રિયો તો આ દેહના છે, આલોકના કરાય, પણ પહેલું તમારા મનને મારો. તમારું મન અંદર જે ચકડોળ ચડ્યું છે ને એને મારો. રાજીપો છે ભગવાનને દર્શન થયા વગર નારદજી એટલા અનંત જન્મો સુધી તપ કર્યું અને મારું ભજન કરી રહ્યા મને મેળવવા માટે. તો હું તમારી સામે બેઠો છું, બરાબર? અને મારે હજી તમારી જોડે કેટલા કામ કરાવવાના બાકી છે અને તમે આવા મનમાં વિચારો કરો છો કે અમારે સહન નહીં થાય. શું છે આ સંતોના મનમાં? એ સહન નહીં થાય. સહન નહીં થાય એની વાત આગળ આવે. એટલે મહારાજે એમને આડા આગળ લીધા છે સારા શબ્દોમાં, સમજ્યા? મારે તો હમણાં 2 સદે હતા, બેનો ત્યાં બદ્રિકા સ્ટેપમાં જઈને તપ કરીને ભગવાનને રાજી કરવા છે. તે 1 જન્મ અથવા તો 2 જન્મ, આગળ નારદજીની વાત થઈ ને, 2 જન્મ તથા સહસ્ત્ર જન્મ સુધી પણ તપ કરીને જ ભગવાનને રાજી કરવા છે. એ નારદજીની વાત પાછી આગળ કન્ટિન્યુઅસ કરે, સાંભળજો. અને જીવનું કલ્યાણ તો એટલી જ વાતમાં છે કે પ્રગટ પ્રમાણ એવા છે શ્રી કૃષ્ણ નારાયણ તેનું સર્વે કર્યું થાય છે, પણ કાળ કર્મ અને માયાથી કોઈનું કરી થતું નથી. એ ભગવાન કે આ જીવનું કલ્યાણ આગળ જે વાત કરી ને કે મહારાજ તમારા શરીરે કસર છે તે આ તો સત્સંગને માટે કઠણ કાઢશે. કેમ? તમે શરીર જીવના પ્રાણ છો. એટલે સંતોનો કહેવાનો મતલબ કે મહારાજ તમે એથી આવી રીતે જતા રહો, તમને કંઈ થાય આ બધાનું કલ્યાણ કોણ કરશે? તો ભગવાન કે એ કલ્યાણ તો કે છે કે હું હોઉં તો થાય એવી વાત છે. કલ્યાણ તો શેમાં છે? તો કે મને આટલો જાણે ને એમ જ કલ્યાણ છે કે કલ્યાણ તો કે હું હોઉં તો જ થશે એવું નહીં કે મનુષ્ય છે. કલ્યાણ તો કેવું છે? તો ખાલી મને પ્રગટ પ્રમાણ જાણ. શું કે છે? પ્રગટ પ્રમાણ શબ્દો પકડવા જેવા છે. આ